Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. This water mirror sky of Little Jade capital is indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu examined the water mirror sky under the dragon Chilene's feet and exclaimed in admiration. This thing was very marvelous. When looking from the bottom, one could see an azure blue sky during the day, and a starry sky during the night. However, when one came above the water mirror, they would see another world. The water mirror sky lifted Little Jade capital up and separated it from the world. When standing above and looking down, one could see the clouds floating past mountains, sometimes revealing their terrain and long rivers that looked like dragons. What is this water mirror sky made out of? Qin Mu suddenly jumped down from the dragon Chilene's back and stretched out his hand. What he touched was actually like a real world. He scooped up some water with his hands, and he could actually hold it in his hands. It would even flow out from the crevices between his fingers. Qin Mu stood up and stamped his feet. The surface of the water mirror then rippled outwards. Weird, this isn't water nor is it air. What exactly is this made out of? He was becoming more and more astonished. Could there still be materials I don't know about in this world? No, I have to get to the bottom of this. He was full of excitement. After having learned to forge from mute for so many years, it was already a habit for Qin Mu to study a material he hadn't seen before upon encountering it. He opened Cyan Heaven's eyes to study the structure of the water mirror sky in detail, trying to find how it was formed by the rune markings. However, to his disappointment, he couldn't find them. This is impossible. Water mirror sky is clearly a treasure, and since it's a treasure, it requires rune markings to increase its power. It's impossible for there to not be a single rune marking. Qin Mu was stunned. He had seen the sealing techniques of gods before, for example, the beehive seals in the underground space of Ghost Valley. Within them, there had been flickering rune markings. Could the forging technique of this water mirror sky surpass the methods of gods? How could he not see any rune markings? The dragon Chilene had already reached Little Jade capital and ascended onto a flying island. Xiongxiu turned back to take a look, only to see Qin Mu still playing with water on the water mirror sky. She couldn't help smiling. This cult master and human emperor Qin may seem mature, but he is still a kid at heart. Hermit Qin Yu immediately came forward and raised human emperor's seal high up in the air. He looked towards the dragon Chilene's back and saw a mother and daughter as well as village chief who was like a human stick. Everyone hesitated for a moment. Hermit Qin Yu smiled. Human emperor, please take back your precious seal. Village chief flew down from the dragon Chilene's back with the rocking chair, but he didn't take the human emperor's seal. He shook his head. I'm no longer the human emperor. I have abdicated and passed the responsibilities to the next generation. Hermit Qin Yu hurriedly looked at that mother and daughter, hesitating for a moment. The current human emperor is a woman? It's no wonder then that this woman doesn't look weak and is already cult master level. It's extraordinary. However, she doesn't look like a person of Middle Earth, but like she comes from West Earth. There was no lack of women among the previous human emperors, but Xiongxiu was from a tribe in West Earth, and this made him feel strange. However, the tribes in West Earth were also human, so they could also become human emperors. Wanderer Qing Yu and the old immortals of Little Jade capital greeted Xiongxiu and Xiongxiu, who immediately smiled. I'm not the human emperor, fellow seniors. Don't scare me, I can't handle this. Hermit Qin Yu looked at Xiongxiu and revealed a troubled expression. Xiongxiu knew why they were mistaken and smiled again. The human emperor is behind. Hermit Qin Yu and the rest of the old immortals of Little Jade capital looked toward the water mirror sky and saw a youth that was playing with water. Their faces couldn't help turning black. For this youth to be the human emperor, this little girl might be better off. Qin Mu examined the water over and over again, but he still couldn't see its structure. He then sneakily took out a small jade bottle to store some of the water. He stuffed the cork back into the bottle and put it inside his Daotai sack, ready to study it in detail when he had the time. This method of forging a treasure was not as simple as striking metal. It was somewhat similar to Mute's treasure, a forging method that left no fixed shape and was thus worthy to be studied. Mute's treasure has no fixed shape, and he could forge black gold and black iron into treasure that had no fixed shape or state, reaching the level where he could transform them at will. Qin Mu was still far from this realm. No one should notice that a little water is missing. The youth raised his head and saw a bunch old sage-like elders looking at him with a dumbstruck expression. Qin Mu's expression froze, and he instantly laughed loudly, beaming up at them. He clasped his hands in a greeting. The current human emperor pays his respects to fellow senior brothers and sisters. Sorry to disturb the peace of seniors, I feel bad about it. The old immortals all returned the greeting. Hermit Qin Yu rose and said, "Please take human emperor's seal back." "That's right, the water mirror sky of our little Jade capital, could human emperor please?" "Old Tao Master, Old Rulai, both of you senior brothers are actually here as well." Qin Mu caught the human emperor's seal and stuffed it into his Dao Tai sack. While laughing loudly, he walked over to Old Tao Master and Old Rulai. "Senior brothers have also come here to become immortal." That's good, you can be free from your worries." Old Tao Master and Old Rulai immediately returned his greeting. Old Rulai smiled. "Old Daoist and I are now free from our burdens and don't have much time left. Coming to this peaceful land to spend our final years is also a good thing." Old Tao Master smiled. "Could human Emperor Qin also want to be an immortal that ignores the world affairs? If you are willing, it would be the fortune of the world." Qin Mu shook his head. "I'm duty-bound, so how can I dare to shirk my responsibilities?" Old Tao Master and Old Rulai greeted village chief with a smile as well. "Senior brother has abdicated the position of human emperor and even left great ruins. Could you be wanting to become a carefree immortal in Little Jade capital as well?" Village chief shook his head and said bleakly, "Mua is just afraid I will be lonely in the village by myself, so he's bringing me wherever he goes." Hermit Qin Yu came forward with a smile. "Old human emperor, new human emperor, and also 3 Dao friends, this way please." Qin Mu followed him to a celestial mountain, where the scenery here was magnificent and beautiful, having a different kind of flavor to it. The celestial mountains that were floating in the sky were connected by rope bridges which seemed to form a kind of wonderful formation that made the mountains float. Borrowing the law of heaven and earth, this kind of method doesn't seem to be from the mortal realm. Qin Mu's heart was greatly shaken. This kind of array belonged to a borrowing law whose degree of superiority reached an inconceivable extent. Even though Qin Mu wasn't a formation expert, he knew that all the formations in the world were required to abide by the law of behavior and have a source of energy to operate them. For example, Qin Mu had once thought of creating 9 Heaven's True Origin cannons with Fire Heaven's Eyes to protect Saint Arrival Mountain. However, the medicinal stones that would be needed to maintain such formations would be massive, and so he could only drop the thought. The formation of the celestial mountains and rope bridges, in the meantime, borrowed the law from heaven and earth. It took the energy from heaven and earth, so there was no need for medicinal stones or pill furnace to provide it. In the attainments regarding formations, Little Jade capital could be said be thousands of miles ahead of Eternal Peace Empire. Qin Mu wanted to study the formation of Little Jade capital, but after how he had provoked those old immortals by stealing a bottle of water mirror sky, it wasn't a good time to strike right then. This Little Jade capital is a little similar to my Heavenly Saint cult. The two of them use the same formation, so could they be related? Qin Mu's gaze flickered. Heavenly Saint cult's Saint Arrival Mountain was also floating in the sky and had formations protecting it that borrowed the law from heaven and earth. Heavenly Saint cult's great educational Heavenly Devil scriptures were extraordinary, but they still couldn't surpass Eternal Peace Empire in the path, skills, and divine arts. However, their teleportation technique was akin to a legendary divine art. It was something to which Eternal Peace Empire's spell divine arts had no hope of catching up. Little Jade capital's water mirror sky showed that their method of forging had also reached an astonishing degree, being as marvelous as Mute's treasure with no fixed shape. It was obvious that Little Jade capital had many techniques and ultimate arts that far surpassed those of the mortal realm. It was no doubt the #1 sacred ground in the world. Hermit Qin Yu toasted village chief and said, Dao Brother went into seclusion in great ruins and disappeared for a few hundred years, and many people thought that you died. Now that the world is at peace, why does Dao Brother have to come out again? Once you come out, people are going to be in a terrible situation again. If you didn't want to come out, how could Human Emperor have asked you out? The people of our generation have mostly died of old age. Even though some people were outstanding and had world-shaking cultivations, they were willing to bury their talent and die quietly of old age in this fake paradise. However, I don't want to die of old age like this. If I die, I want to die like a human emperor should, dying vigorously, village chief said indifferently. Hermit Qin Mu drank a sip of tea and smiled. Dao Brother, so what if we were outstanding? You were the number one in the world back then, one sword lighting up how many mountains and rivers. In regards to outstanding, how could we be compared to you, Dao Brother? But what happened then? What did you become? Village chief's eyes became sharp. Hermit Qin Mu was not frightened at all and placed down his cup. He said, Old Rulai, Old Dao Master, me, Ling Jing, and these immortals all admired you back then. We admired you greatly and felt that your exploits could shake the world. But what a pity, even the outstanding you were forced to such a state. Village chief was silent. Hermit Qin Mu sighed. Your lofty aspiration was obliterated with your limbs, but not everyone is like you. We feel that staying here is pretty good as well. You are not a fish, so how can you know the happiness of a fish? I'm also not you, so I can't share your emotions. Village chief lifted up the teacup with his vital qi and slowly drank his tea. Hermit Qin Mu looked at Qin Mu and smiled. Human Emperor Qin, Hermit has heard of your name before. You are also the sacred cult master of Heavenly Saint cult. Qin Mu's heart stirred, and he said, since you guys are immortals that stand aloof from worldly affairs, why do you still have to scout out the worldly affairs? Hermit Qin Mu smiled and didn't explain. He had a feeling to try to keep him 1,000 miles distant from himself. After Human Emperor finishes his tea, please leave little Jade capital. Qin Mu didn't drink the tea, but took out the golden book. May Immortal please take a look at this book. I wonder if Immortal's heart will be moved. Hermit Qin Mu flipped open the golden book, and his face changed. His aura suddenly rose drastically before becoming calm once again. He flipped to the second page and then to the third page. After a moment, Hermit Qin Mu closed the book and pushed the golden book back to Qin Mu with a smile. It indeed moved my heart. Human Emperor Qin, please leave. Qin Mu was stunned. Anyone who saw this golden book would find it hard to stay calm, much less return the book to him. Yet this Hermit Qin Mu actually seemed to be unmoved, making everything he wanted to say useless. Immortal Qing, why? Just as Qin Mu said until this, Hermit Qin Mu gave him a deep look and said, all the previous human emperors were like this, it's hard to make a human emperor give up. In that case, let Hermit make things clear to Human Emperor. He stood up and asked, does Human Emperor Qin have a sense of familiarity when looking at Little Jade Capital? Does it look like Heavenly Saint Cult's Saint Arrival Mountain? Qin Mu was stunned and couldn't help standing up as well. He indeed had a sense of familiarity. The thing that he felt was the most familiar was the formation Little Jade Capital used to borrow the lore of heaven and earth. It was nearly the same as the one used in Saint Arrival Mountain. This is because Little Jade Capital and Saint Arrival Mountain come from the same source. Hermit Qin Mu looked at the majestic celestial mountains of Little Jade Capital and said softly, Heavenly Saint Cult Saint and the founder of our Little Jade Capital were both people from the same generation. They walked out from the same place. Not only Heavenly Saint Cult and Little Jade Capital. He turned back to look at Village Chief while putting emphasis on each word he voiced. The first-generation human emperor from Hall of Human Emperors also came from there. Furthermore, Little Jade Capital, Saint Arrival Mountain, and Hall of Human Emperors are fragments from the same place. Dao Brother who has gone to Hall of Human Emperors before should know very well what kind of place that is, right? Qin Mu's brain was blown, and all kinds of thoughts surged through his mind, turning it into a mess. Even his ears were buzzing. What Hermit Qin Mu had revealed was simply too astonishing, just too unbelievable. Little Jade Capital, Heavenly Saint cult and Hall of Human Emperors actually came from the same source and the same era. They were created by people who had walked out from the same place. Not only that, these three sacred grounds were actually the fragments of the same place. Qin Mu turned around to look at village chief. His expression was normal, without any fluctuations. It was as if Hermit Qin Yu's world-shaking words were not enough to move his heart. Or more likely, he had already known the connection between the three sacred grounds, so the words held no shock value for him. Old Rulai and Old Dao Master, however, were shocked. It was obvious that these two previous leaders of two big sacred grounds didn't know the inside story. The origin of those two sacred grounds was even more ancient, but not all history got recorded. Hermit Qin Yu pulled his gaze away from village chief and looked at Qin Mu. As he smiled, there was surprise in his expression. Looks like old human emperor didn't tell you any inside information. You have also not been to Hall of Human Emperors. Young human emperor, you should take a trip there, you'll learn many secrets in that place. Qin Mu composed himself and said solemnly, may immortal Qin Yu clarify. Hermit Qin Yu looked at village chief whose expression was like an old well. Hermit Qin Yu smiled. If you are not saying, I shall meddle in your affairs, even if it's not my place. Human Emperor, please follow me. He walked down the mountain, and Qin Mu followed. Village chief also quietly floated behind the two of them. Xiong Xiu hesitated for a moment, then pulled back Xiong Chia while shaking her head. We shouldn't dabble into the affairs of Middle-earth. Xiong Chia couldn't understand, but Xiong Xiu had her own worries. The matters of True Heaven Palace were already giving her a headache, yet the matters of Middle-earth were even more terrifying. She could sense that some secrets were better off not known. Old Dao Master and Old Rulai looked at each other, and Old Dao Master smiled. We are already free from our burdens and have become immortals of Little Jade Capital. Let not learn any more secrets so we don't spoil our frame of mind. Old Rulai took a look at him and said, what that golden book records in the method to connect the divine bridge. Is Dao Friend's heart not moved? So what? Old Dao Master said leisurely. Where's the person that created the method to connect the divine bridge now? Old Rulai was stunned and laughed loudly. He didn't plan to follow after them as well. All the previous human emperors failed, so there's no need to join in the fun. As for the dragon Qilin, he also didn't follow after them. He sprawled out to the side, began to snore, which sounded like thunder striking the land. You will be eaten, Xiong Chia whispered in his ears. The dragon Qilin immediately raised his head and looked around cautiously. When he saw Qin Mu not around, he said to the little girl, I will exercise after taking a nap. Xiong Chia actually believed him. Qin Mu followed Hermit Qin Yu across the long rope bridge and passed by a few celestial mountains until they came to a particular one. Hermit Qin Yu led them up to the mountain peak through an extremely ancient hall. It seemed to not have been repaired for many years and was a little dilapidated. The walls were broken, and there were not many pillars that were supporting the ceiling. It was as if they had been destroyed in the fires of war. That huge hall was called Hall of Historical Records. The writings on the horizontally inscribed board were slightly blurry, but Qin Mu could still see that the person who had written those 4 words had extremely high attainments in calligraphy and painting. The words, Hall of Historical Records, had a profound meaning of history as a feeling of transformation swept into one's face from the words. During founding Emperor era, Hall of Historical Records was a famous place. Hermit Qin Yu walked through the hall, but there were no books there. Only rows of ancient bookshelves were left. The interior of the room they were in had a circular shape, which was very vast. Qin Mu saw numerous shelves placed on the circular walls, so anyone who wanted to read them would have to take a walk around. However, it was a pity that all the books were gone. Many books in this place were destroyed in the fires of war, while the remaining books were moved to other halls to preserve them. The group of immortals that founded Little Jade Capital had at first planned to tear down Hall of Historical Records, but in the end, they found it meaningful to let it remain, so they didn't touch it. Hermit Qin Yu went to walk the wall, past the rows of empty bookshelves, his hand caressing them. Qin Mu followed after him, slightly stunned. A magnetic force came from the wall and drew his body toward it, allowing him to be able to walk freely on the wall. Those immortals that founded Little Jade Capital were in charge of recording the history during founding Emperor era. Not only during it, but also the time before it. Because of them recording everything, we can see the failures in history and know the dangers that come with them. That's why when founding Emperor era was obliterated, they moved out of Hall of Historical Records to found Little Jade Capital, this sacred ground. Little Jade Capital is far from the mortal realm and doesn't participate in worldly affairs. We only quietly float outside the mortal realm to record the prosperity and decline of the world. Does Human Emperor know where Hall of Historical Records used to be located in founding Emperor era? Qin Mu shook his head. Hermit Qin Mu walked to the domed roof with his head facing the ground and legs moving over the roof. In that case, does Human Emperor know the meaning of Jade Capital? It's the capital in which Celestial Emperor lives, said Qin Mu. Hermit Qin Mu sighed. That's right, the capital city where Celestial Emperor lives. Jade Capital is Celestial Heavens. The name Little Jade Capital is used to commemorate the capital in which resides Celestial Emperor. The history recorded in Hall of Historical Records was actually for Celestial Emperor to read. Qin Mu's heart was greatly shaken, and he stared blankly at him while muttering, Little Jade Capital is from Jade Capital. That's right, Little Jade Capital is from Jade Capital. Hermit Qin Mu turned around and looked away from him to glance at Village Chief. He said in a solemn voice, Little Jade Capital comes from the capital city of founding Emperor era, Jade Capital. Hall of Human Emperors is also from there, as well as Saint Arrival Mountain. They are all fragments of Jade Capital. The ones that created the three big sacred grounds, no matter if they were the immortals of Little Jade Capital, the first generation Human Emperor of Hall of Human Emperors, or Saint Woodcutter of Heavenly Saint Cult, they were all from founding Emperor era's Jade Capital. Village Chief's eyes sparkled. Since we are all from the same source, why won't Little Jade Capital lend a hand? Human Emperor Qin is also the cult master of Heavenly Saint Cult. Based on sentiment and reason, your Little Jade Capital should support us with your fullest might. Hermit Qin Mu walked down from the domed roof and shook his head. Old Human Emperor, your magnificent aspirations are hard to eliminate. You are still so stubborn and pig-headed, swallowing ancient learning without digesting it. I really want to show you the history recorded in Little Jade Capital. I really want to show you the cruelty of it and crush all your beliefs, to see you crawl on the floor and cry helplessly, to see you devastated and void of life. He let out a shaky breath and then added indifferently, I don't need to do this. Because I just need to let you see a few stone statues and you will crumble. He walked out Hall of Historical Records and looked at a celestial mountain nearby. Qin Mu and Village Chief also left Hall of Historical Records, side by side. The clouds above the celestial mountain far away were rising in spirals and the celestial rays were like rainbow sashes surrounding the majestic stone statues. These stone statues had multifarious ambience and it wasn't known which heavenly work had sculpted them. Hermit Qin Mu walked down the celestial mountain and headed towards the direction of a rope bridge. They came to a celestial mountain with stone statues, and the corner of Qin Mu's eyes suddenly twitched. He saw a stone statue with the get-up of a woodcutter and a stone hatchet in his hand. It was very tall, as if the person had been a giant. The woodcutter was sculpted to be remarkably lifelike. He didn't seem like something sculpted, but a petrified human. This is the saint which Heavenly Saint Cult worships. He is the woodcutter who imparted his path on the rock. Hermit Qin Mu looked up at Woodcutter's stone statue and said, after he imparted his path, he was completely disheartened and came to Little Jade Capital. Like the immortals who founded Little Jade Capital, he chose to turn into a stone statue here. Look, where is his gaze looking? Qin Mu's heart shuddered, and he croaked, Great ruins. He's looking toward great ruins. That was once his homeland, but that place had become a barren land at the time. He couldn't do nor change anything. Qin Mu's words were like knives into Qin Mu's heart. The man's ordinary words were like the most terrifying divine art that could destroy his will. The previous cult masters of your Heavenly Saint Cult were all outstanding, but which one's attainments surpassed those of Woodcutter? So what if he is your saint? Wasn't he disheartened to the point he chose to become a stone statue in Little Jade Capital? He walked to the second stone statue, which had the appearance of a scholar. The man's gaze was bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying the fate of mankind. He held a scroll in his hand, but even though it was open, his gaze was not on it. He was also looking at great ruins. This is one of the immortals that founded Little Jade capital. He was one of the historians in charge of Hall of Historical Records during founding Emperor's era. Hermit Qin Mu then walked to the third stone statue. This is also a historian from Hall of Historical Records. There's also him, and her. He walked past those stone statues and came to one that was extremely tall and large. It had a presence that was extraordinarily heroic, and the man's hands were propped on a sword which was stabbed into the ground. The statue's gaze was aimed into the distance, in the direction of great ruins. Their homeland had turned into ruins. And no matter how gallant or fierce they were, their magnificent aspirations were all crushed. Hermit Qin Mu raised his head and revealed a serious expression. That person during the ancient era when founding Emperor era was destroyed tried his best to save the world, but he who struggled for the human race to survive couldn't help becoming disheartened as well, turning into a rock here. Old human emperor, among the corpses of the past human emperors in your Hall of Human Emperor, hasn't one always been missing? He's right here. Hermit Qin Mu's expression turned sorrowful as he said, he's right here. Village chief's mind was blown as he raised his head to look at the extraordinary majestic stone statue. The founder of Human Emperor Hall, the first human emperor, the one who saved countless big and small sects, saving the seeds for the future civilizations, the man who was revered by all sects as the emperor of the human race, the person who founded Hall of Human Emperor, yet this legend had lost his drive in the end as well. He had turned into a stone statue in Little Jade capital. A rumbling came from village chief's heart. It was the sound of his persistence and certainty crumbling. It was akin to that day all those years ago. All that he persisted on and all his beliefs suddenly crumbled, turning him back into the helpless old man whose limbs had been severed. He wanted to struggle, but he had no hands to grab onto anything. He wanted to stand, but he had no legs, he could only squirm on the ground. That was what he was back then. Only after Qin Mu had come to disabled elderly village that he slowly walked out of that helplessness and despair. Yet the moment the god in his heart crumbled, he was thrown right back into that swamp of misery. His eyes became hazy, and he wanted to stretch out his hands to grab something, but he couldn't grab onto anything. He collapsed on the ground and wanted to stand up, but he couldn't. Qin Mu hugged the white-haired and helpless old man. Mu, the previous human emperor, cried out, begging, "Let us return to disabled elderly village, let's return, let's not come out anymore. Return human emperor sealed to me, return it to me. I can't let you walk my old path, I need to bring it to my grave. You can't handle this responsibility." It was Qin Mu's first time seeing village chief so helpless and in such despair. He hugged him like he was holding onto a floating ring, begging him to bring him home, to disabled elderly village, to his own little world. Qin Mu truly couldn't believe that this terrified and devastated old man was actually the expert that had taught and educated him. He had never imagined that the powerful village chief could be so easily struck down. Village chief always said that he was too powerful, yet all his beliefs had been so easily crushed. When village chief had been struck the first time, he went to disabled elderly village to become a disabled old man whose heart and ambitions were crippled. If old Ma, apothecary, mute, and the rest didn't come to join him there, it was hard to imagine what he would have become. Qin Mu still remembered the sight of village chief all alone after apothecary and the rest left the village. The dispirited village chief just sat at the village entrance, letting the wind and rain batter him, the darkness wash over him, and his beard grew frantically. All of this happened because he didn't feel like moving. He didn't care about his appearance and didn't eat or drink. It was as if he wanted to rot right there and then. Yet the village chief had to have been even more dispirited when he'd been struck down the first time. At that time, it had been his personal failure that had led him to lose all interest in life, until he became no better than a walking corpse. Yet right then, what had struck village chief was not his personal failure, but the failures of the previous human emperors and that of the first generation's human emperor. Qin Mu could feel the despair of the once great man. He was like a frightened child that wanted to escape into his own world to huddle up and lick his wounds, or maybe just hide in a dark corner where no one would see as he rotted away. Without experiencing this kind of failure, it was hard to understand what village chief was feeling. Hermit Qin Mu looked over from nearby, his eyes filling with pity as he sighed. He hadn't wanted to strike the old human emperor like this, but Qin Mu, this new human emperor. He wanted to give this brat who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a severe lesson, to let him know that all he was seeking and all the responsibilities he took upon himself were nothing but a joke in the end. All his hopes and hard work would lead to nothing. Yet his blow didn't land on Qin Mu, but his old friend, who was left devastated. The two of them had interacted a lot during their youth. Back then, village chief had invited him down the mountain, and he had agreed and went down, but so what? He had returned to little Jade capital covered in injuries. Even his heart had been wounded. From then on, he was disheartened, and all his hot-bloodedness had been washed off. In the years after, he had read through all kinds of records in little Jade capital and knew much more about the history. The greater his knowledge became, the less of the youth that went down the mountain was left in him. When Qin Mu came to see him with the technique that could patch the divine bridge and allow one to become God, he was indeed moved for an instant. His dormant blood had once again become hot. But right after, it cooled down. So what? Even if he patched up his divine bridge, could he become stronger than the immortals who founded this place? So what if old human emperor managed to patch his divine bridge? Could he become stronger than the human emperor who founded Hall of Human Emperors? So what if Qin Mu became a god? Could he be stronger than heavenly saint cult Saint Woodcutter? So what? Hermit Qin Mu was slightly stunned when he heard Qin Mu's voice. The youth repeated his words once more and smiled at the disheartened village chief. So what? Grandpa village chief, so what if they failed? Naive child. Hermit Qin Mu broke out in laughter and shook his head. The current human emperor is still a naive child who likes to play with water. Back in the day, I was also hot-blooded like you, a naive child. Qin Mu smiled. They failed, the previous human emperors and Grandpa village chief. But so what? When the first human emperor failed, wasn't there a second human emperor? When he failed, wasn't there a third one? Village chief, even if you failed, isn't there still me? Village chief was stupefied. His white hair swayed as he shook his head. I don't want you to become like me, he said in a sob. The him then was just an ordinary old man and not the human emperor that could rebuke the heaven and earth. He was not that sword god whose sword skill had reached the realm of the path. He was just a crippled old man who wasn't willing to let his child follow in his footsteps. I'm the Overlord body, have you forgotten? Qin Mu said with a smile. The only Overlord body, and I was raised by all of you. Isn't that enough? Overlord body? Village chief laughed and cried at the same time. Overlord body. Hee, it's my sin. Mua, let us go home, okay? I beg of you. Qin Mu's vital chi surged out and lifted the elder into his arms. His smile was radiant like the morning sun in early spring. It seemed to be able to drive away all the dark clouds in others' hearts, bringing them warmth and hope. Overlord body will never admit defeat, never accept death. Qin Mu had an indescribable infectiousness to his voice when he straightened his back and spoke with new confidence and certainty. I will surpass all of you and stop always being the number 2 in the world. I will surpass you in sword skills and become the sword god, reaching the extremes in sword path. I shall surpass Grandpa Apothecary in the art of healing, Grandpa Cripple in speed, Grandpa Mute in forging treasure, Grandpa Deaf in the path of painting, Grandpa Ma in fist skills, Grandpa Butcher in knife skills, Grandpa Blind in divine eyes, and Granny Sai in divine arts. I will be the number 1 in the world. Hermit Qin Mu laughed loudly. Human emperor's ambitions are laudable, but can you surpass these stone statues? Can you surpass those in great ruins? Even if you can you surpass founding emperor? His voice gradually became sterner as if he was lecturing a small boy. You are only a naive child that has ambitions, but has never been faced setbacks or trials, so go back and play with water. Isn't it good to be an ordinary human and live an ordinary life? You can't yet understand a world of adults. Qin Mu raised his head to look at the stone statues and said calmly, if I don't work hard and strive for success, I will naturally not surpass the first human emperor. But if I push myself one step at a time, there will be a chance, there will be hope. If I don't work hard and strive for success, but only think about failure all the time, of course I won't have shit. He took a glance at Hermit Qing Yu. Immortal Qing Yu, since you are an immortal, will you die? Hermit Qing Yu shook his head. There's no immortal that won't die. What can you leave behind? Asked Qin Mu. This video will end here.